This is an extract from the Leader podcast by the Evening Standard. The whole thing is available on all major podcast providers.
The normally heaving streets of London's West End were left desolate after 1 past midnight on Saturday, when Tier 2 coronavirus restrictions were imposed as Health Secretary Matt Hancock designated the capital a high-risk region.
People cannot now meet other households socially indoors.
Our editorial column says it's critical the hospitality industry gets more support ahead of winter.
The current situation is clearly intolerable. It is simply not fair that businesses hamstrung by government-imposed restrictions are being given no support to help them cope with the inevitable drop in custom. Proper financial help must be given to help businesses survive while we remain at the current level of restrictions. That will inevitably cost significant sums of money on top of the huge outlays already made by the government during the pandemic. But it's needed because hospitality and other businesses need to remain viable so they can help lead the recovery. Closures and mass unemployment must be avoided, so the government must dig deep once again.
Hospitality workers in London's Parliament Square on Monday banging pots and pans and holding signs that read "Cancel the curfew." They're calling for more government support amid more measures to halt the spread of coronavirus, which top chef Yotam Ottolenghi says have been badly executed.
There's so many people who are dependent on the hospitality industry, and all those livelihoods are at risk without the proper support from the government.
The Standard's consumer business editor Jonathan Prynn spoke with the owners of the West End's hard-hit restaurants. Jonathan, what did the first weekend of these new restrictions look like?
It was pretty catastrophic. I think probably about as bad as anyone feared. The minute the announcement was made last week, they started seeing huge numbers of bookings cancelled. And that rolled through Friday into Saturday. And I think probably over the weekend as a whole, particularly in central London, West End, you'd be looking at restaurants with bookings down probably about 50%, late night bars, possibly as much as 70, 80%. I mean, it was pretty horrendous. Probably the worst weekend they've had since hospitality came back on July the 4th.
It was quite nice weather at the weekend and people had the option to sit outside. But as we head into the colder months, what does the future of the industry look like if these restrictions continue?
Well, it's pretty bleak, and even Jason Atherton, who is a Michelin-starred chef with an incredible track record of success, was saying he feared that huge swathes of the industry will not survive through the winter for precisely those reasons. They've had 3 big hits now: the rule of 6, the 10 o'clock curfew, and now the no mixing rules of Tier 2 regulations. I think each one of those would have been bad, but not fatal. But put the 3 together, and it's just incredibly hard for them to operate at any kind of profitable level. They are all desperately trying to make the most of any outdoor space that they can. But as you say, October is one thing, January, February is another. So I think they're all going to be try and be extremely clever in how they try and persuade British people or Londoners who traditionally don't eat outside in the winter months to change their habits. And, it's going to be heaters, it's going to be rugs, it's going to be blankets all through the winter, I think.
One of the restaurateurs you interviewed said they were facing the worst of both worlds. What did they mean by that?
Well, what they mean by that is in Tier 2, you have this huge knock to your revenue because people in different households can't go out. So that takes away a lot of your customer base, apart from families and households. So you lose maybe 50% of your revenue. But unlike Tier 3, where some businesses, some bars and pubs that don't serve food are forced to close down and get compensation from the government in return, in Tier 2, no one is actually forced to shut down. So it doesn't trigger any government assistance. So you get that loss of revenue on the one side, but no support from the government on the other side. And I think that's what people complain about, that makes Tier 2 uniquely tough for businesses that are just trying to do the right thing.
The city's leading business owners were out today protesting against the restrictions. What are they calling on the PM to do?
they want the PM to address this gap between revenue and government support by extending all sorts of measures to the hospitality sector, which could include waiving VAT. It could include a more generous furlough scheme that's aimed just at the hospitality sector. It could include help with business rates. There's all sorts of things that they are calling grants as well that will be available to tier 3 businesses that are shut down by the government. There's a whole range of measures that could help people survive through these next few weeks and months, but none of them are on the table at the moment, although obviously they are for the tier 3 areas, which is Liverpool and Lancashire, and I think Manchester is about to go into tier 3 as well. None of that is available for London, and I think that's why they're so angry. They argue, not unreasonably, that they did everything that was asked of them when they were reopened to make themselves COVID compliant, COVID safe. Also, they point to the very small number of outbreaks of coronavirus that can be traced to restaurants and bars, and say they are being clobbered unfairly and unreasonably and in a way that will put many of them out of business.